My name is Margaret Allen, and I am 74 years old. If you're listening to me now, you might think I am just another old woman with fading memories, but I promise you what I am about to tell you will shock you. My husband, Charles, vanished 35 years ago, and for decades I believed I was a widow. I cried myself to sleep more nights than I can count, and I begged God to give me at least an answer. Was he alive? Was he dead? Had he abandoned me? The silence was the cruelest part. I built my life on that silence, patching my broken heart with routine and prayer. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the day he came back. It was a late autumn evening when it happened. The leaves had begun to fall, the air smelled faintly of smoke from a neighbor's chimney, and I was sitting in my rocking chair, knitting the way I often did when the evenings grew too quiet. That's when I heard footsteps outside. I thought it was just the mailman dropping something off late, or maybe one of the neighbor boys cutting across my yard. But when I looked up I froze. Standing at the gate was a man I knew as well as my own reflection. His hair was thinner, his shoulders slumped, but those eyes, those same deep brown eyes, were unmistakable. It was Charles. My Charles. I nearly dropped the knitting needles from my hands. My breath hitched in my throat, and I whispered his name before I even realized it. Charles. My voice sounded so small, like a frightened child's. I hadn't spoken his name aloud in years, not like that, not with hope still attached to it. He smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth twitching the way they always had when he was nervous. "Hello, Maggie," he said softly, using the pet name I hadn't heard in over 3 decades. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. I stumbled to my feet, half ready to collapse into his arms, half ready to slap him across the face. 35 years of pain and loneliness surged in me all at once. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On his left hand, glinting faintly in the dying sunlight, was a wedding band. Not the old scratched-up gold ring we had exchanged when we were barely out of our teens. No, this was new, shiny, polished, like it had only been worn for a handful of years. My knees buckled, and I had to grab the doorframe to steady myself. Why would he be wearing a new wedding band? Who had given it to him? I forced myself to breathe. "Where have you been, Charles?" I asked, my voice trembling. But instead of answering me directly, he stepped closer and reached for my hands. His skin was colder than I remembered, rougher too, but I couldn't ignore the way his touch sent a flood of memories crashing back. The nights we had spent under the stars, the mornings we had laughed over burnt toast, the promises we had whispered about growing old together. "I've come home," he said simply. That was all. No explanation, no apology, just those 3 words. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Did he not realize what he had done to me? Did he think he could just walk back into my life, into this house, as though nothing had happened? Rage bubbled up in me, but so did desperation. I wanted to know everything. I needed to know why. I let him inside. My heart was racing, my head pounding, but I made tea the way I always did when I didn't know what else to do. He sat in the old armchair by the fireplace, his eyes darting around the room as if seeing it for the first time. That unsettled me more than anything. This was our home. How could he look at it like a stranger? And then I saw it. As he leaned forward to set his cup on the table, something slipped from his jacket pocket. Photograph. My stomach dropped as I bent quickly to pick it up before he could. My fingers trembled as I turned it over. It was a picture of a woman, young, maybe in her late 20s, with dark hair and a soft smile. But what made my heart seize in my chest was how much she looked like me when I was younger. The resemblance was uncanny, almost haunting. "Who is this?" I demanded, holding up the photograph. My voice was sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. Charles's face darkened. He snatched the photo back and slipped it into his pocket. "Just someone I knew," he muttered. His tone was clipped, final, as though I had no right to ask. But I did have the right. I had every right. I stared at him, my heart pounding louder than the ticking clock on the mantel. That photograph was not just someone. I could see it in his eyes. And suddenly, an icy realization crept over me. The man sitting in front of me might not be the husband I thought I knew. He was Charles, yes, but he was also someone else. Someone who had lived a life I knew nothing about. That night, as I lay awake in bed, I heard him whispering. His voice was low, urgent, but there was no one else in the room with him. When I crept out to the living room, I found him sitting in the dark, staring into the cold ashes of the fireplace. His lips moving as though speaking to a ghost. I didn't ask who he was talking to. I was too afraid of the answer. And as I pressed my back against the wall, clutching the blanket around me, one thought echoed in my mind so loudly I couldn't escape it. My husband had come back after 35 years, but he wasn't the same man. And the secret he carried was going to break me. The very next morning, I stumbled upon something in his bag that proved my worst fear. Charles hadn't just returned with secrets. He had returned with a life that might still be chasing him. The morning after Charles returned, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest. The night had been long, restless, filled with shadows and whispers I couldn't explain. My house, once a sanctuary of silence, now felt claustrophobic, suffocating under the weight of his presence. I rose quietly, careful not to wake him, and padded down the hallway toward the small guest room where he had chosen to sleep. For a brief moment, I thought perhaps it was all a dream, that maybe my grief had conjured up his face, his voice, his touch. But the faint sound of his breathing behind the door reminded me it was all too real. Curiosity gnawed at me. I needed answers, even if they tore me apart. I crept into the room and found his jacket draped across the chair. My hands trembled as I reached for it, my heart beating like a drum in my chest. I knew it was wrong to snoop, but I had waited 35 years for answers. Didn't I deserve them? I pulled the jacket into my lap and fumbled through the pockets. At first, it was just ordinary things. A handkerchief, a half-empty pack of cigarettes, a lighter. But then my fingers brushed against something heavier. A small leather-bound notebook. My breath caught as I opened it. The first page was filled with dates, neatly written in a script I recognized as his. But the names beside the dates were unfamiliar. Sarah, Lydia, Rebecca. Page after page, lists of names, ages, addresses. Didn't make sense. And then I turned to the back of the notebook. My blood turned to ice. There, pressed between the pages, was a birth certificate. The name at the top made my head spin. Charles Allen Jr., born 27 years ago. Father, Charles Allen. Mother, Rebecca Hayes. My hand shook so violently I nearly dropped the book. He had another family. Another life. While I sat here grieving him, burying myself in loneliness, he had been out there building something new, with someone else. Tears blurred my vision, and I had to grip the chair to keep from collapsing to the floor. A sound behind me made me spin around. Charles was standing in the doorway. His eyes fixed on me, the notebook clutched in my hands. His face twisted in fury, and for the first time since he had returned, I saw a flash of the man he truly was. "You went through my things," he said, his voice low, dangerous. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. "You lied to me, Charles. All these years you had another family. You let me suffer, you let me think you were dead, and you were out there living a lie." For a moment he said nothing. Then he stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, until he was just inches from me. "You don't understand, Maggie. It wasn't that simple." His breath was hot against my face, but his eyes, those cold, distant eyes, were harder than stone. "Then explain it," I demanded, though my voice cracked with fear. "Tell me why you disappeared. Tell me why you left me here to rot while you built a new life." His jaw clenched. He snatched the notebook from my hands and stuffed it back into his jacket. "Some things are better left buried," he muttered. "You wouldn't survive knowing the truth." That sentence cut deeper than any blade could. What kind of truth could be so devastating that he thought it would destroy me? That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in decades. My hands shook as I turned the key, but even then I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words in my mind, over and over, until the questions drove me mad. Who was this other family? Were they still alive? Did they even know about me? And most terrifying of all, why had he come back now after all these years? As dawn crept in through the curtains, I realized one thing with certainty. Charles hadn't come back out of love. He had come back because something was chasing him. And whatever it was about to catch up. The following evening, a stranger showed up at my door, asking for Charles by name. And the look in his eyes told me that my husband's secret was bigger and more dangerous than I had ever imagined. When I heard the knock on the door, my body stiffened. I was in the kitchen, trying to calm my nerves with a cup of tea, but the sound made the porcelain cup tremble in my hand. Few people ever visited me these days, and the timing, just a day after discovering Charles's secret, was too much of a coincidence. I shuffled to the door, every step heavy with dread. Through the small window, I saw a tall man in a dark coat. His expression hard, eyes scanning the house as if searching for something or someone. My heart pounded. I cracked the door open, keeping the chain lock in place. "Yes?" asked cautiously. The man leaned in slightly. "Is Charles Allen here?" His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, sharp as a blade. My breath caught. I hesitated, my fingers tightening on the door. "Who's asking?" The man pulled a wallet from his pocket and flashed a badge. My stomach lurched. "Detective Harris," he said. "We need to speak to your husband. It's urgent." I nearly slammed the door shut right then. Husband. The word burned like acid. But what terrified me wasn't the detective. It was the realization that Charles was already standing behind me. I hadn't even heard him come down the hall. He placed a hand on my shoulder, firm, almost possessive. "I'll handle this, Maggie," he murmured. His voice was calm, but I could feel the tension in his grip. Reluctantly, I unlatched the chain and opened the door. Detective Harris's eyes flicked between us, narrowing slightly. "Mr. Allen, we've been looking for you for a long time." Charles's jaw tightened. "I'm sure you have," he said flatly. "But I don't have anything to say to you." The detective raised an eyebrow. "Maybe not. But you'll want to hear what I have to say. It concerns Rebecca Hayes, and your son." My heart lurched violently in my chest. Rebecca Hayes. The name from the birth certificate. My knees weakened, and I had to grip the wall to steady myself. Charles's hand slipped from my shoulder as though the strength had drained out of him. "Not here," Charles muttered, glancing nervously down the street. "Come back tomorrow." The detective's eyes hardened. "Tomorrow may be too late." He handed Charles a card, then turned and walked briskly away. The silence that followed was unbearable. I turned to Charles, my voice breaking. "Rebecca Hayes. Your son. Tell me the truth, Charles. Tell me everything." But Charles didn't answer. He just stared at the card in his hand, his face pale, as if the detective's visit had confirmed his worst fear. And that's when I realized the truth. Whatever secret Charles was hiding, it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about survival. That night, I lay awake again, the detective's words echoing in my mind. What had Charles done? What had he dragged into my home after all these years? And more importantly, was I in danger just by being near him? The next morning I overheard Charles on the phone, and the words I caught made my blood run cold. "If she finds out the whole truth, she'll be dead before the week is over." Sleep was impossible. My body was exhausted, but my mind raced like a storm with no end. The detective's visit, the photograph, the birth certificate, Charles's new wedding band. It was too much. Yet nothing could have prepared me for what I heard the following morning. I had risen early, hoping to gather my thoughts in silence, but as I passed the guest room door, I heard Charles's voice. Low, urgent on the phone. My blood ran cold. I pressed my ear to the wood, straining to catch his words. "No, she doesn't know everything yet," he whispered harshly. "But if she finds out the whole truth, she'll be dead before the week is over." The words sliced through me like a knife. My hand flew to my mouth to keep from gasping aloud. Who was he talking about? Me. Rebecca. Someone else entirely. My knees nearly buckled under the weight of the realization. The man I once loved, the man I thought had come home, was plotting something deadly. I stumbled back from the door, my heart pounding so violently I thought it would explode. I rushed into the kitchen and gripped the edge of the counter, my breath coming in ragged gasps. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was danger. Real, tangible, life-threatening danger. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. I needed to know the truth, even if it destroyed me. When Charles came down to breakfast, he acted as though nothing had happened. He buttered his toast, sipped his coffee, even asked about the neighbor's dog. I watched him carefully, every movement, every glance, wondering how much of it was a performance. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Who were you talking to on the phone, Charles?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my insides. He froze, the knife hovering over the butter dish. Slowly he looked up at me, his eyes cold, calculating. "You've been listening to me. I deserve to know the truth," I said, my voice trembling now. "If you've dragged something dangerous into this house, I have a right to know." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he set the knife down carefully and leaned back in his chair. "You want the truth, Maggie? Fine. But once you hear it, there's no going back." I swallowed hard, bracing myself. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Rebecca Hayes wasn't just a woman I loved. She was part of something bigger, something darker. And now it's coming for me. For us." My stomach twisted into knots. Bigger. Darker. What could he possibly mean? Before I could ask, he pushed back his chair and stormed out of the house, leaving me alone with nothing but questions. And in that silence, I realized something terrifying. The man at my table wasn't my husband anymore. He was a stranger, and I didn't know if I would survive the truth he carried. That afternoon, I received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was only one sentence: "Leave him now, or you'll never live to regret it." The letter sat on my lap like a burning coal, searing into my trembling hands. I read it over and over, my mind struggling to make sense of its terrifying simplicity. "Leave him now, or you'll never live to regret it." It wasn't signed. No handwriting I recognized. No return address. Just those chilling words on plain white paper. My hand shook so violently I nearly tore it in half. Someone out there knew. Someone out there was watching. For the first time in my life, I felt like a character in a story I hadn't written. My house, my safe, quiet home, suddenly felt like a cage, its walls closing in around me. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow stretching across the wall made me jump. Was someone watching me through the windows? Was someone waiting for me outside? Charles came home later that afternoon, his shirt damp with sweat, his eyes restless. He looked like a man being hunted. I wanted to throw the letter in his face, demand answers, scream until my lungs gave out. But something stopped me. Fear. Not just fear of him, but fear of what the truth might do to me if I pulled too hard. Instead, I slipped the letter into my apron pocket and watched him carefully. His hands trembled slightly as he poured himself a drink, downing it in one gulp before pouring another. He caught me staring and gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You look tired, Maggie," he said softly. "You should rest. I'll take care of dinner tonight." The words were gentle, but they felt rehearsed, hollow. I forced a nod and excused myself, retreating to my bedroom. I sat on the bed, clutching the letter, fighting back tears. Then I made a decision. If I stayed in the dark, I would die in the dark. I had to find out the truth for myself. That night, while Charles snored heavily in the guest room, I crept into the kitchen and dialed the number on Detective Harris's card. My fingers shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. "Detective Harris," the voice answered. My throat tightened. "It's Maggie Allen. I need to know what's going on. Please." There was a pause. Then his voice softened. "Mrs. Allen, you're in danger. Your husband isn't the man you think he is. He's been involved in something very serious for a long time. Organized crime. Extortion. Trafficking. That's why he disappeared 35 years ago. He didn't just leave you. He was running for his life. My knees buckled. I sank to the floor, the phone pressed hard against my ear. No, I whispered. That can't be true. He was a good man. He loved me. I don't doubt he loved you, Harris said gently. But people change when they're caught up in things bigger than themselves. He faked his death because the people he worked for wanted him gone. And now, they've found him again. My stomach churned violently. And me. A long silence. Then Harris said, "If they think you know too much, you'll be next." That night I didn't sleep at all. The letter's warning echoed louder in my mind, mixing with the detective's words until they consumed me. Leave him now. Or die. But how could I leave after 35 years of waiting? How could I walk away when the truth was just within reach? The next morning I found a bloodstain on the front porch, fresh, dark, and leading away into the woods. And Charles was nowhere to be found. The blood glistened in the morning light, a dark, sticky trail leading from my porch into the woods beyond. My breath hitched as I crouched to touch it. Fresh. Still warm. My hands trembled as I pulled them back, crimson smeared across my fingers. "Charles," I whispered, though fear made my voice shake. Without thinking, I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and stepped outside. The woods had always been peaceful to me, but now every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig felt like a warning. My heart pounded in my chest as I followed the trail deeper into the trees. The path twisted and turned, the blood smearing across branches, staining rocks, soaking into the dirt. My mind raced with questions. Was Charles hurt? Or was this someone else's blood? And if so, whose? I walked for what felt like hours until the trail ended in a small clearing. My breath caught in my throat. There, lying against a tree, was Charles. His shirt was torn, his face pale, blood seeping from a wound in his side. "Charles!" I dropped to my knees beside him, pressing my hands against the wound. "What happened? Who did this?" His eyes fluttered open, dull and clouded with pain. "Maggie," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You shouldn't have followed me. Tell me the truth," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "No more lies, Charles. Please." He coughed violently, blood staining his lips. "They know I'm here. They've been watching. I tried to protect you, but it's too late. They'll come for you, Maggie. Just like they came for Rebecca." My stomach lurched. Rebecca. The woman from the birth certificate. The woman Detective Harris had mentioned. "What do you mean? What happened to her?" Charles's eyes filled with a haunting sadness. "She's dead. They killed her. And our son, he's not safe either. That's why I came back. I needed a place to hide. I thought maybe I could make things right with you before the end." My heart shattered. All those years I had dreamed of his return. And now, here he was, broken, dying, confessing to sins too great to forgive. I pressed my forehead against his, sobbing. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you trust me?" His breath rattled in his chest. "Because love wasn't enough to save us back then. And it won't be enough now." Suddenly, a branch snapped in the distance. I froze, lifting my head. Shadows moved between the trees, too fast, too deliberate to be the wind. Charles's grip tightened on my wrist. His eyes wide with terror. "Run, Maggie. Please, run." As I rose to my feet, 3 men in black coats stepped out of the trees, their eyes locked on me. And one of them raised a gun. Time slowed. The glint of the gun barrel caught the morning light, and my entire world shrank to that single terrifying moment. My breath caught in my throat. My body froze. Then the shot rang out. I stumbled backward, bracing for pain, but it never came. Instead, Charles gasped violently, his body jerking as the bullet tore through him. He had thrown himself in front of me. His blood sprayed across my hands, hot and sticky, as he crumpled to the ground. "No!" I screamed, collapsing beside him. His chest rose and fell rapidly, each breath weaker than the last. His eyes locked onto mine, full of pain and regret. The men closed in, their faces expressionless, like shadows come to life. One of them knelt beside me, his voice low, almost pitying. "You should have stayed away, Mrs. Allen. This didn't have to involve you." My hands shook as I clutched Charles's lifeless body. "Why? Why are you doing this? Who are you?" The man's eyes narrowed. "Your husband owed us. Iran. He betrayed us. And now debts must be paid." I wanted to scream, to fight, to claw at their faces. But my body betrayed me, frozen in place. Charles coughed weakly, blood bubbling on his lips. "Maggie, listen to me. Our son. Find him, protect him." Then his body went limp. A wail tore from my throat, raw and primal. But the men didn't flinch. They simply turned and walked back into the woods, their message delivered, their job complete. I was alone. Alone with the body of the man I had once loved. Alone with the crushing weight of his secrets. Alone with the knowledge that somewhere out there, a son I had never known was in danger, and it was now my responsibility to protect him. The detective returned later that night, his face grim, and the first words out of his mouth made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Allen, your husband's killers aren't done. You're next." The house was dark, silent, suffocating. Charles's blood still stained my hands, no matter how hard I scrubbed. His final words haunted me, echoing in every corner of my mind. Our son. Find him. Protect him. When Detective Harris arrived, I was sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the wall. He didn't bother with formalities. He closed the door, stepped inside, and sat across from me, his face pale. "They'll come for you next," he said quietly. "Charles's debt doesn't end with his death. You're the last loose end. And his son. He's their real target now." I gripped the armrest, my nails digging into the fabric. "Then tell me where he is. Tell me how to find him." Harris hesitated. "He's been in witness protection for years. But now that his father's resurfaced, his cover is blown. If they find him before you do," he trailed off, shaking his head. Tears stung my eyes. "All these years, Charles let me grieve him. He let me live half a life, while he destroyed another. And now I'm supposed to clean up the mess he left behind." Harris leaned forward, his eyes piercing into mine. "You don't have a choice. You can run or you can fight. But if you run, they'll find you. If you fight, you might just save yourself and his son." For the first time in decades, I felt something awaken inside me. Rage. Determination. Strength I didn't know I still had. I wiped the tears from my face and straightened in my chair. "Then tell me where to start." Harris handed me a slip of paper with an address. My fingers shook as I held it, but my resolve didn't waver. That night, I packed a small bag and stood at the doorway of my home for what I knew would be the last time. I had spent 35 years waiting for Charles to return, only for him to bring death and chaos with him. But now his story was over. Mine was just beginning. As I stepped into the night, I whispered a silent promise to the son I had never met. I will find you. I will protect you. And I will not let his sins become your fate. Somewhere out there my husband's enemies were waiting. And I knew this was only the beginning. Love, no matter how deep, cannot survive without truth. Secrets destroy more than just trust, they destroy lives. And sometimes the greatest act of love isn't clinging to the past, but choosing to fight for the future. If this story gripped you, share it, because the secrets we bury have the power to rise again when we least expect it.